Hello everyone. So I recently checked and apparently I have 200 subscribers now. I tried to celebrate this with a live stream of Super Mario Bros. 3, but that didn't work out since I couldn't figure out how to get sound to the thing. For my 100 subscriber special, I did an AMA and discussed some of my favorite movies and video games. This time, I figured I would discuss my favorite Ghibli movies. Ghibli, take a pick. I always just heard it as Ghibli, to be honest, so I really don't know. Because Disney is very well known for copyright strikes, I cannot show any of the footage of any of these movies. So all this is just going to be off the top of my head, and this isn't going to be like an in-depth review like I've done with other things. It's going to be more of a, this is why I like this movie, or this is why I hate this movie, more or less. Okay. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. At the bottom we have Princess Mononoke. Before you start sending all that hate email, I have a very good reason for putting this at the bottom. I have not seen this yet. As you can tell, I haven't even taken it out of the saran wrap. I'm not a person that goes in for high blood and gore content, which this is very famous for having. Someday I hope to build up the courage to be able to sit through this entire movie, but for now, it's just kind of sitting in my collection as a trophy piece. Now we're actually going to get into the movies I've seen. So, at the real bottom we have My Neighbor Totoro. This is the 20th Century Fox version. I'm well aware that there's a Disney dub, but I have not seen it, so I have no idea how to compare the two. For this one, Totoro becomes the mascot of Ghibli, so I figured this was going to be like the greatest movie ever made. But it's kind of slow moving, it's a little boring. I will admit it did keep my attention, but every so often I just kind of went, what time is it? Oh, still going. I think it's because this is more geared to a younger audience, unlike, say, as an example, Winnie the Pooh. I feel like younger audiences and older audiences can like it for several reasons. For the adults, they can look at it as in, wow, childhood was fun. I used to do this stuff all the time. And the children can look at it and be like, wow, look at those fun characters. I feel like with this one, it's more meant for the kids. I mean, not to say that the adults can't get anything out of it, but I feel like it's more just a fun little adventure. You just kind of pop on to keep them entertained for a little bit. I know that this is a treasure for many Ghibli fans, but it just didn't really do it for me. Next after that, going with more controversial likes, above My Neighbor Totoro, I put Spirited Away. I personally feel that this movie is overrated. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it's a pretty good movie, but this is the only one to win an Oscar and several other awards. Are you kidding me? I find the ending to be kind of a letdown, in all honesty. And once again, it kind of gets a little gruesome, and once that stink beast comes up, I'm just kind of like, I'm so happy I didn't have dinner before this. It's just kind of gross and it's bloody. Not to say that it kind of hinders the experience, but leaves kind of a sour taste in my mouth. And then after that, we have Porco Rosso. I probably should have taken the price tag off. Actually, yeah, price tag is gone. So, much like Spirited Away, I really don't like the ending of this one, but everything else I think is done beautifully. The animation, the dialogue, the characters, it's all really well done. But there's the epic fight scene at the end. I wanted to see that. I'm not sure if maybe they were like over budget or something and they couldn't afford to animate that, but it just seems kind of a letdown when after the big fight between Porco and, I'm sorry, I can't remember what the other pilot's name, they are able to put aside their differences and then attack the big swarm coming in. and then it just jumps to Porco being married, and then it just ends. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like this movie. I just think the ending could have been done a lot better. Since the others I've done were controversial, this one will just add more to the controversy. The Warriors of the Winds. I know what you're thinking. How in the world could you put this above My Neighbor Totoro? In all honesty, I really don't think this dub is that bad. In fact, no disrespect to Uma Thurman, but I feel like the voice of Kushana here is much better. There's just something about her conviction and her vaguely British accent that I think fits beautifully.
We are your hope. Your only hope for survival. Together we can build a future of peace and prosperity.
Villagers, we have come to your land in the name of peace. Our goal is to unify the kingdoms surrounding Tolmikia.
The animation, obviously it's the same thing, and the thing I find most surprising is that the musical score is the same in both this version and the Disney version, which is higher on the list, as you may have guessed. Other than, say, the half hour being cut out of it, I really don't see why it's so offensive and so must be forgotten about. I think it's a pretty good movie. Now, the next movie I don't actually own. It's called The Whisper of the Heart. I'll just pretend I'm holding it right here. It's a movie I've only seen once, and I'm not really sure if I'd ever see again. It's not that it's a bad movie, it's one of those movies where you just kind of see it once and you have the whole story. The animation is great, the characters are great, just like all the other Ghibli masterpieces. And I also want to mention that the director of this movie, this was the only one he was able to do since she was tragically killed in a car accident shortly after. If this was his first, I would have loved to see what his other masterpieces would have been. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a bad movie, I just don't really find it too interesting. It's hard to explain. But seeing it once, I feel like you just get the gist of it, and that's it. And then after that, we have Kiki's Delivery Service. If I'm ever going to introduce anybody to the art of Studio Ghibli and the direction of Hayao Miyazaki, this is the movie I would do it with. It's not necessarily the biggest, but I feel like it hits all the elements just right. The characters, the animation, the dubbing, the pacing. Probably the thing I like most about this movie is the idea that it's kind of a slice-of-life sort of movie, but the idea that there's a little bit of magic in there. I mean, she's a witch, there has to be a little bit of magic in there. But probably the thing I find most fun about this movie, and I probably should have said this beforehand, but I feel like what separates Miyazaki's work from other anime is he treats the characters as if they were actors, human beings doing normal things. It kind of makes me think of back in the day when they had 3 or 4 hour epic masterpieces with really good acting, really good music score, and awesome set pieces. The only problem is those movies were about 3.5 hours long, intended to drag. Now, not to say that Miyazaki's work doesn't drag, but sometimes it does kind of go on for a little bit. Like, it feels like they could have cut it up, made it move a little faster. But at the same time, it seems like it gives a little more weight and momentum to the characters. Alright? Then this is where we start getting into the top 3 territory. Howl's Moving Castle. You may have kind of saw my shirt here as Calcifer. I'm not really sure what it is about this movie. Maybe it's just the idea of all this magic going on and just this beautiful imagery. This is a very beautiful movie to watch. Even if you didn't have the sound on, I still think you could still watch and go. Because I just think it's that good. Now, story-wise, I feel like this one you have to see about 3 or 4 times in order to get it right. The idea of the whole war being fought, it's just kind of barely mentioned by some of the soldiers, and it's only said once, so if you don't hear it, you don't really understand what war is going on that they need Howl for in the first place. And then on top of that, this one kind of also falls apart at the end. Apparently the prince that this war was being fought over had been the turnip head the whole time. And I guess true love's kiss is what undid the curse, but at that point it's so obvious that she is in love with Hal at that point, so I don't get it. But don't let that sway you in any way. I think this is a fantastic movie. Even if the story is a little hard to follow, but the epic imagery definitely more than makes up for that. Alright, so I mentioned the Warriors of the Winds before. Well, here is where I put Nausicaa of the Valley of the Winds. Not only does this have the extra half hour that Warriors of the Winds didn't have, but also some really good performances. I think Patrick Stewart was just perfect for the part of Lord Yupa. I'm not really sure about some of the other ones. I don't know the name of the actress that does Nausicaa, but I think she does a much better job than the person in Warriors. There's something about Warriors of the Winds that just sounds like she's 35.
Wake up! Come on, boy. Time to go back to your jungle.
And she was clearly meant to be maybe a teenager, maybe like 20s at the most. And I feel like that is where this one really shines. And plus there's a lot of other elements that were ripped from Warriors of the Winds as well that are brought back here. For example, the idea that the earth itself is polluted and that's why all the plants are poisonous. That was completely cut out of that version. And I'm trying to think about what else there was. There was some minor scenes kind of cut for pacing. For example, there's a long and tearful goodbye when Nausicaa has to leave the valley. That is completely cut from Warriors. Basically, you just see her leave, it cuts, and then you go on to the plane. Here, it's more emotional, and it's just done better. Alright, and now for my honorable mention. The Castle of Cagliostro. I know that this is not a Ghibli movie, but it is directed by Hayao Miyazaki, and being his first time, I think he hit it right out of the park. This is perhaps one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm a pretty big James Bond fan, and I also like animation and the look of Studio Ghibli. This is the happy medium that brought both of them together. And I would love to see other Lupin properties. This sold me on the character. And can we just kind of talk about the box art here? It looks like something you'd find out of the dollar store. But I guess that's one of those old phrases. Sometimes the greatest of things come in the smallest and unassuming of packages. And I will agree with that with this movie. Once again, that's just an honorable mention because it's not Ghibli. In fact, I'm not even sure who animated this. All I know is they had about 10 months to animate this, so production was rushed. And now for my number one. Dun, 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 dun. You probably already guessed it by now. Castle in the Sky. I am with John Lasseter on this one. I think this is the greatest movie that Studio Ghibli has put out. True, I have not seen the other ones, like Tales of Earthsea, The Wind Also Rises, The Red Turtle, and I can't help thinking there's one based on an old Japanese folklore. It's like Princess something. I think there's also Poko, but that is kind of a controversial one. I'm not sure if that's even part of the Ghibli catalog or not. But anyway, this, I think, is the greatest movie that Miyazaki has put out. And it was only his second, right after Princess Nausicaa. I guess he was just able to bring in the energy that he was able to put into that movie and put it also into this one. Now I'm trying to think, why would I say this one's the best? It has great action, it has nice slow parts, great characters, although I will say the voice of Sheeta is a little distracting at times because sometimes she kind of talks like this, and then other times she kind of talks like this. So do the people of Gondor kind of have British accents that go in and out? It just seems a little inconsistent. And probably the only other gripe I have with this movie is it always seems to be a little longer than I anticipated to. However, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing because whenever I would see old Disney movies, which also had probably the same level of quality in terms of animation. Well, even Ghibli might be even a little better than that. But their movies probably never lasted for more than an hour and a half. And this one lasts just over 2 hours. I can see why this took about 3 years to make, because that's a lot of animation. Other than that, I'm not really sure what more to describe about this. I just think that this is an A+. This is the one that I put on the top, and I compare every other Ghibli movie to. I'm not sure if that's necessarily fair, but this is just my absolute favorite. Well, I hope you enjoyed my little list, and I hope that some of my choices didn't lose me a few subscribers, but I guess I'll see what happens within a few days. Well, until next time, keep having fun.